Welcome to the Business Growth Spotlight, where we shine the light and talk with business leaders from all over the world who are here sharing their insights and wisdom so we can all grow together. I'm your host, Heidi Schalk, co-founder of HLH Growth Solutions, where we help businesses scale using outside-the-box visibility strategies. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. We're glad you're here. You're in for a treat today. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to my guest today. He's a pro at podcasting. He's been in radio, which I thought was very exciting when we chatted behind the scenes. But I'm excited to bring you Alex Brueckmann with Brueckmann Strategy Consultants. So welcome, Alex, to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me, Heidi. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to talk with you. So, Alex, can you share with us a little bit about yourself, about your company, and your role within it?
Well, the name kind of speaks to it. My company is called Brueckmann Strategy Consultants, so I'm the founder. Gave it my name. The company is in its 7th year now. It is the second company I've built. The first one here in North America. The first company I built before that was a company called Strategic Leadership, which is still around, has been pretty successful for over a decade now. A company that was more in the leadership development space. And when I transitioned from Europe to Canada, I decided to focus more on the strategy piece of things. So I've always done both things, strategy development and implementation and leadership development based on the strategy. I still do both, but rather than doing 80% leadership development and 20% strategy, I kind of took the opportunity to flip that script. And today I do 80% strategy work and probably 20% of leadership development work.
So, what was it that inspired you to flip that and lean more into the strategy versus leadership?
When I mean we, I mean my partner and I, when we met back in Germany, and she relatively early in the process told me that she would like to go back home and revealed that home was Vancouver, Canada, I had an opportunity to decide whether I really want that. And it is not easy to leave a business behind that you helped build. So at this point, obviously it was more than just myself. We had employees, multiple locations in Europe. And when I thought about the pros and cons of going through with moving to a different continent, it was apparent that also meant to rethink how I earn a living. And in that process, I asked myself, what am I truly passionate about? What do I have a lot of energy? It was hard to answer because both the strategy world and the executive development world are, I feel, equally at home in both of them. But the true change that comes is when you anchor anything around executive development or leadership development in your business strategy. And unless that's clear, it is really hard to derive a program or to create leadership development work that truly moves the needle for the people. So if you learn skills that then aren't 100% relevant back in your job, both the training was a waste and the money that was spent on it. So I didn't want that anymore for my clients. And that was the moment I decided that I want to do more and more of the strategy work to help them figure out where they want to be in the future and how they actually get there. And then from there, understand what it takes in terms of skill building, in terms of capabilities in the organization, so that strategy becomes a relevant force of change and a relevant decision factor for them on a daily basis. And then you train the skills and capabilities that you need to make those decisions in the best possible way and to follow through with your work that is now anchored in strategy. And that is just something that then started this whole process of writing books about it, of creating the 9 elements of organizational identity framework. And from there, things just spiraled. It fell on really fertile ground. People understood it. Leaders run with it. They read the book. They reach out. They want to collaborate. And that's when I realized that's actually something that is really valuable. And so we started to build the business based on that.
So you just touched on it, and I want to go a little deeper there. So you use the 9EOI, or that's what I think it is.
That is correct.
Strategy framework. So can you walk us through what that means and how it helps organizations bridge the gap between planning and execution?
So when people use the term strategy, they often use it in the wildest ways. For whichever reason, the word has found its way in all niches of life, if you want. But when we use the word strategy, we use it in the context of business strategy. And business strategy needs more than just the strategic elements to function, to work, to really bring change, and with that, hopefully success. And I used to be a management consultant before I went into this line of work. And I've seen that most of the work that the typical management consulting companies do has really little to do with strategy. It is often strategy adjacent, but you don't get the opportunity to really reshape an organizational identity based on a company's strategy that often. A lot of leaders that I work with, senior leaders, even in their late 40s or 50s, they admit that they have never really done strategy. They've done planning, they have done other strategy adjacent topics, but it is sometimes really hard to understand what strategy really is for these people because, let's be honest, we don't become leaders because we are great at strategy. Most of us become leaders because we're really, really good at a certain subject matter, be it sales, be it HR, be it legal, be it operations, whatever it is. But as we grow a leadership career, at some point, people just expect us to understand what strategy is and how it works. And then it is really difficult for us to just flip that switch in our head and be like, okay, let's park my subject matter expertise for a moment and really do strategy. And because that is so difficult for leaders, I created the 9UI model. And if you want to think about it, the 9UI stands for the 9 elements of organizational identity. And it basically is designed in 3 concentric circles, where in the middle you have your cultural core, around it, your strategy, and around that, what we call execution edge. So you basically need those 3 rings because they all build on each other and they are interrelated. I'll give you an example. So when we talk about the cultural core, a part of what the cultural core is of an organization has to do with the impact that you want to create for your customers based on the purpose that you have as an organization. And when I use the word purpose, I basically ask, what is it that you are uniquely positioned to solve? What problem in the world can you address in a way that it creates tangible impact for your customers? And that also requires to define who your customers are. Where do you play? What is your market? And all these questions have such an important fundamental role before you can even think about strategy that when these elements of identity aren't clear in your cultural core, you cannot make the choices that help you win in your marketplace. Which basically means you cannot create a proper strategy. Strategy as the choices that you make to win in your market, according to Roger Martin. I love this definition so much because it is clearly tangible for everyone. So we make choices. There are 100 different things that we could potentially focus on to reach a certain point where we want to be in the future, but we don't have enough money and time and people to do all these things. So we need to make choices. And if you start to try and make choices without being clear about your cultural core, you quickly realize that what you describe as a strategy is literally just a plan of an assembly of projects that you then label a strategy, but in reality, it is not really a strategy. So get your cultural core clear, build your strategy on that core, and then ask yourself, what does it take to drive these choices into action, into tangible results? And that simply means, first of all, I need my people to understand what the strategy is. So I need to be clear in my communication. Number 2, I need to link their individual targets and performance targets back to my strategic goals so that the work that they do every day contributes to the strategy implementation. And they will only be able to do that properly if I help them build the right skills and capabilities, because a strategy means change. If it's not bringing change, it's not a strategy. It's an operational continuous plan, or however you want to call it. And so those elements around individual targets, around capabilities, and around management systems that allow you to follow through with the strategy, that's what we call the execution edge. So unless you work on all those 9 elements in these 3 concentric circles, you will always get to a point where, like, why doesn't this work? Why don't we see results? And you can literally use those 9 elements as a diagnostics tool and figure out where have you done the work and where do you still have to do the work. And then you know also why things don't show up in your results, why your execution stalls, why your people don't really get it or seem to get it. It always points back to you as a leader in an organization. Once you have clarity around these 9 elements, things will fall into place.
So, in your work with CEOs and executive teams, Alex, what leadership gaps most often derail strategy implementation?
I would say number one is a fuzzy understanding of what strategy is, and not only with one person. If you have an executive team of 6, 7, 8 people, chances are they have 8 different opinions about what strategy is. So when they use that word, they think about something, but it's not the same thing as their peers think about. So the first thing that we often do is when we start working on strategy, we use the 9UI framework to actually define what strategy means. We define what a vision is. We define what a mission is. Like, we create a common terminology in that team. So when they use certain words, they know exactly what they're talking about because it's the same definition for everyone. Number two, it is a misunderstanding of how to drive strategy into results, so drive strategy into action. A lot of organizations still use the word strategic planning, and they do that every year. Like, they have their strategic planning session or strategic planning offsite, which in itself already shows a lack of understanding of what strategy is. Strategy is not a plan. That is the first thing that people need to understand. Those are 2 entirely different things. A strategy is the set of choices that will help you win. That is a definition. You define that. Like, what do you do differently than anybody else that creates value for your customers? And because of that, they buy from you and not from someone else. That is strategy. How you drive that into action, how you implement that, needs budgeting and planning, but those are not the same thing. If you approach thinking about strategy with a planning and budgeting mindset, you will not make choices. You will ask yourself, what can we afford to do? That's a very different question to ask. And it's a different mindset, and it requires also a different skill set. So when you do strategy, you really think about options, opportunities. When you think about planning, you think about who does what by when. That's internal. Whereas strategy is external. It is about customers. It is not about how much money do I have to drive certain projects and decide who in my company does those projects, implements those projects. Those are different things. And I think those are the biggest gaps, and if you want to say leadership gaps, that we often come across in this context.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's a lot of confusion around strategy itself, and that's where you and your team come in to
You
help
could say that, yeah.
and then implement the strategy, like set the strategy, get clear on what that is, and then do you help them with the plan and how to execute that as well?
Exactly. The planning phase comes after the strategy design. So if you think about certain stages in what we do, you start at strategy design, then start the sense making process. So if that's your design strategy, does that really work? Would that function? Would our clients see that value? And once you have proof of concept, you go into the planning phase and ask yourself, so ideally, what needs to happen now and how do we do that? Who does what by when? And your budgeting basically then aligns to that. Because, I mean, honestly, if you have money and you don't allocate it to the strategy that you created because you want to win in your market, then what are you doing with your budget? So it is about understanding where do we spend money on that doesn't make sense anymore. It was the right thing 2 years ago, potentially, not the right thing anymore. So it's about defunding projects that dilute your resources. It's about reallocating human resources to the right projects that drive strategy. And that is often really hard for organizations because there's a reason they do certain things in a certain way. Sometimes that's famous because they've always done it that way. And because they've always done it that way, they are really good at it. They are familiar with it. They even like it. But that is the hard thing about strategy. There is change associated to that. And unless we help these organizations be really clear in their communication why certain things aren't the right things anymore and therefore will have to be stopped, and why other things are now the right choices and will have to be funded, If you get that clear, if you get that communication clear, if you help everyone in the organization to understand that rationale, the likelihood of people understanding what's in it for them is much higher, and therefore the likelihood of them buying into a strategy and helping implement it.
So in your materials, you talk about organizational identity, and I think you mentioned it here today too, but you talk about organizational identity as a key anchor. So how does identity influence strategic choices, and how do you help organizations define theirs?
Strategic choices are part of your identity. Like your identity, think about strategy as an element of identity. So when we talk about identity, or when we use the word and think about our own identity as human beings, it's absolutely multifaceted. There's a lot in there. And the same is true for organizations. And some of the key pieces that comprise an identity in an organization are in your cultural core. Like those are the values that you live by. And I'm not talking about these fancy words that companies put on their website that don't have really any meaning. I talk about the stories that we tell each other. I talk about how we behave on a daily basis. What are behaviors that we accept? What are behaviors that we don't accept, both internally and in our work with customers and any other stakeholder group? Those are things that define you. They define your workspace. They define your culture. If you have a wonderful culture, but not a clear strategy, good luck surviving. That's just not going to work. The same is true if you flip that script. If you have a winning strategy in place, but you don't anchor that in a set of guiding principles, meaning the values that define you, the behaviors that you want to see, then you quickly run into the issue that your strategy might be good, but the way people bring that to life is actually toxic. So when you think about strategy as the worst set of behaviors that you are willing to accept before you intervene, that's literally what your strategy is. Sorry, what your culture is. And you don't want that to happen. Strategy and culture both need intentional design. You cannot have no culture. You always have one. The question is, do you use your opportunity and design something that supports your strategy in the best possible way? Or do you just let a culture emerge like a Frankenstein's monster? Everyone who joins the organization brings something from their previous experience in their previous businesses. That just doesn't work. But if you combine culture and strategy, you can create something we call high performance, people-centric high performance organizations. And those are literally the two first layers of the 9UI model. It's the cultural core and it's the strategy. And then around that, you create the systems and processes and knowledge and skills that help drive both your culture and your strategy into results. And the strategy process, that's the reason why the strategy circle is the middle circle in the 9UI model. This process has the right reach. You can't go up and be like, let's have a culture project. People will just roll their eyes, because why would they have a culture project? Like, what's the reason for that? Because our culture doesn't work? Well, if your culture doesn't work, and if you really dig into that, you will realize very quickly that the reason your culture doesn't work is the culture as such. Culture is not an input factor you can work on. Culture is a result of your leadership. And when you ask people what they need from a leader, it is clarity and direction. And that's a synonym for strategy. So if you are able to create strategy that provides clarity and direction, you can lead accordingly, and you can emphasize behaviors that you would like to see in the workplace. For example, how do we take decisions? Is that transparent enough? Do people understand why we say yes to one thing and no to 10 other things? So that's the reach of a strategy. You can do that because it touches all the other elements. A strategy needs a cultural core. The strategy needs an execution edge to show results. You can't just start working on your execution edge without touching your strategy and the culture first. So strategy has this unique positioning in the center of your identity. And if you roll out a strategy process with intention, you also touch these two other circles. And that's when you bring visible results to life.
Now, I'd like to talk about AI because AI is, it's been a hot topic for the last year and a half now, 2 years, and it's not going anywhere. If anything, it's evolving faster and faster as we keep moving forward. So you've said that AI is not a strategy. So can you unpack what you mean by that and how organizations can avoid chasing technology trends without a clear strategic purpose?
If you think about the last 30, 40, 50 years, there has always been a new technology, and AI is just the next one in that line. While it has potentially a similar influence than the switch from a steam engine to electricity, or what the wide adoption of the World Wide Web brought in the 90s, compared to how marketing was done prior to the World Wide Web. Like I recognize and understand and I appreciate that this is a massive change and this is an extremely powerful technology, but it is still just a technology. And I see many organizations talk about AI almost like a chicken that's running around without a head. It doesn't make any sense. AI is at a stage, it is at an early stage. It is at a stage where it can help us expedite work. It can help us accelerate work, but it is still in its infancy. And a lot of organizations talk about AI as a technology as the one solution to every problem that they have. And instead of asking themselves, how can we use AI in a proper way, they're having conversations about a widespread adoption of AI in an organization that just for the sake of having it, they feel they need it in order to, for example, achieve certain efficiency gains. Why is that important for you? How does it support your strategy? How does it support the workplace that you want to build? Like those questions aren't often asked and answered in that process. It's purely how can we use AI to achieve X? But it's not defined whether X is actually part of the strategy or not. So strategy and AI are very different conversations. And I understand AI right now as a resource, as a capability, as something I can use to accelerate strategy implementation. And for example, in the strategy design process, I advise my clients to be very, very careful when they use AI or how they use AI in the strategy design process. And let's be honest, when we talk about AI, we're talking about large language models nowadays. That's what 99% of the conversations are about. And I have seen the results of large language models when you feed them with tasks and prompts around strategy. It is just not good what comes out of those. It is wordy. It is just not a choice, right? So it's not strategy. And the thing is, a large language model cannot design strategy for you because it cannot make your choices because it doesn't know your customers. It doesn't understand the full scope. So while you can use AI in certain ways in strategy design, we are light years away from an AI being really able to make choices and then follow through with those choices. It's just not at that stage where it can do that. And when we hear the news around AI, in this case again, large language model, being great, being better at as many PhD level graduates in certain subject matters, you really need to be careful with these statements. That might be true when it comes to things like taking standardized tests for, like in the text space, when it comes to law, like everything that is clearly based on certain rules. But strategy is not based on certain rules. It is a purely human decision-making process at this stage, fumbling around with certain opportunities, understanding what works well and what doesn't work well, testing, refining. This is nothing that you can feed into an LLM and what comes out of it is then a strategy. We are very far away from that point in time before we human beings aren't needed anymore in the strategy process.
I like to switch gears a little into growth. and how you've grown. You've been in business now for you said 7 years. It's been you've had a good run, and you're continuing to grow. So you've made it past that 5 year mark that we hear. Like it's a big challenge for many companies in the first few years, especially first 5 years. So can you share with us maybe some things as far as one, who do you have a specific ideal ICP? Do you have a specific ideal client, or are you pretty agnostic with who you help? And two, what are ways that you're standing out from the crowd as far as the space that you're in to be getting in front of your ICP?
So the ideal client that we have defined for us is probably defined very differently from how other organizations define their ideal client profile. So we're not talking about a persona or something like that. The type of businesses that work with us are all over the world. They come from all kinds of industries, and they are very different when it comes to maturity and where they are in their life cycle. How we define our ideal client is based on whether they understand what strategy is or not. So the moment they approach us with a certain ask. They have identified a certain pain, and they know that they can't do this work alone. Our ideal client understands that what they want to do and where they are today is such a big spread that it will be impossible for them to do this work alone. And if you have that level of insight and maturity, you will reach out. You will start to look for people that can support you. So our ideal client is not a company that needs a strategy. Like it would make sense, right? Like for a strategy consulting company, and doesn't every business need a strategy? Well, yeah, right. So based on that, you could say every business out there from a certain size is our ideal client. But we have stopped to try and educate people around why they need a strategist, why they need a strategy facilitator. It doesn't make sense. It's just a waste of our energy and time to help people understand or see why they need someone. People understand that once they have tried certain things and they realize they turn in circles, they realize they don't get to the point where they want to be. And if they're then self-reflective enough to understand that it might be a skill gap and that they might need a certain process and a certain experience to go through these exercises as organizations, that's when they then reach out to external help. And those are the people that we work with. Like we literally work for organizations that have thousands of employees at the same time as we work for organizations, I wouldn't even call them businesses, organizations that are comprised of maybe less than 100 people. But they both have the same need. They would like to consciously create their future success. And that's when they reach out to us. How we stand out is a completely different question, because the thing is, we didn't make a conscious decision about that at the beginning. We experimented a lot. We tried to figure out what works, what doesn't work. And then over time, I shut down one outreach channel after the other. The only thing that we do is podcasting. So we talk about how we help our clients. And then the other thing that we do is we help individuals, not organizations. We help individuals by, well, educating, if you want, around strategy. So we talk a lot about the connection between strategy, culture, and leadership on LinkedIn. So the posts that I put out there every day, they are educational. So the whole educational piece is outsourced into our social media, but that's content-based marketing. So we're not doing any outreach to customers that we don't know. There's no cold calling, there's no cold emailing or anything. The work that we do is based on the right people finding us and then coming to us. And then we know they're ready. And that's how we potentially differ from other organizations that pump out ads, that pump out all kinds of content through every channel available. So we're not on Facebook, we're not on Instagram, we're not on TikTok. We're very deliberate with finding our clients or being found by potential clients through podcasting and on LinkedIn.
Which is great because it sounds like your marketing is very streamlined. It's very simple, actually. It's not complicated, which is something I think founders and business owners, especially if you're new in your business, I think we try to overcomplicate what we're doing, and simple is better. It's not always easy, but it can be simple. And there's two different, that means simple and easy mean two completely different things. That I think as business owners, especially when we're new and we just, whether it's we have to bring in revenue or we have these goals we need to meet, whatever it looks like, and we're on these timelines, that we're trying to throw spaghetti at the wall and trying to try too many different things at once. And for you, you're very clear on my people are on LinkedIn. I just need to educate them. Once they're educated, it may take one time for somebody to reach out. It may take 100 times for somebody to reach out. Everybody's on their different timeline, but as long as I'm showing up consistently and educating my people, because I know that's what they need, then we'll get the people reaching out to us. And by the time they reach out to you, I'm guessing it's a much easier relationship to create going forward, meaning close them as a client because given you've given the information. So by the time they get to you, they're well educated, and now they're just like, okay, what does it look like to work with you? Which makes your job a lot easier in moving them into the next step of building that strategy with them. And podcasting, which is near and dear to my heart. I have 2 podcasts. So I love that that's a big strategy for you, and a big way that marketing piece that works for you. When you say podcasting, do you mean guesting or do you mean both guesting and hosting? Do you have a podcast yourself?
Purely guesting. Used to create a podcast, I think 2 years ago, which was a one and done, like 10 episodes based on interviews that I ran with thought leaders in our industry, which was then later produced by Wiley into the red book that you see behind me, if you have your video on. Each of these conversations were then available as a companion podcast, but I don't have a podcast that I regularly host.
Okay. You were in radio. How come you don't have a podcast?
Everything in life has its time.
Yeah, no, I hear you. So what's next for you and your company?
We started about 1.5 years ago to experiment with a different type of work that we do. So while I would say traditionally 100% of the work that we do or did was based on us standing in front of people, now we have understood that more and more people would like to understand how that actually works, what we do, so that they get less and less dependent on people like us. And I totally appreciate that. A lot of organizations also simply do not have the funds to work with an organization like us. And they still need to do strategy work. They still need to consciously shape their culture. And they want to know how it works. They want to know how we did that. So we started to create a suite of strategy related courses that we teach. Some of them are free. Others are live courses that I lead myself that end with a 9EOI strategy certification. So it depends on where you are in your journey as an entrepreneur or as a business owner or as a C-level executive. It's really interesting to see how that completely blew up into something that we would never have expected. Like it started very innocently and grew into a 6-figure business in no time, simply because people want to know how it works. And it all kind of started when they read the Strategy Legacy. More and more readers reached out and were like, so how do you actually do that? I understand the process. I understand the framework. Help me how to do that. And that's when I sat down and was like, okay, I actually have this other book in me. And I wrote Creating the Strategy Legacy, which is the companion. It's the field guide for the Strategy Legacy. So the Strategy Legacy gives you the framework of 9EOI and the process of bringing it to life. And then I captured all the workshop descriptions, all the exercises, all the assessments, all the diagnostic tools, all the questionnaires, and everything we actually do with our clients and put it into that blue book. And the 9EOI strategy certification training, for example, teaches how you run these sessions, how you create those 9 elements one by one by one. And while this is obviously our flagship program, our flagship course, there are a lot of other courses that we offer, and they are so cheap. Some of them are, as I said, some of them are free. Others don't even cost $100. But it's not about the money. It's about the joy that I realized that I have with helping people succeed without hiring me. And that is a very interesting experience because I never thought I would enjoy teaching. Because in the end, a course is you are teaching something. And I really enjoy that. So I'm now in my late 40s, and I understand when people say that teaching is one of the most fulfilling things they've ever done. So while I'm not traditionally a teacher, this has become a very important stream of income for us and a very significant stream of income. Your question is, what's next for us? So that's what's next for us. We will continue to grow our suite of strategy courses. And by doing that, help people around the world be more successful with their businesses without having to hire a strategy facilitator like me.
So, Alex, if I could give you a magic wand and you can wave it over one challenge that you could have right now that could hold you back from achieving those what's next for you, your big goals, what would that, and you can go poof and just wave it and take it away. What would that issue or challenge be and why?
Well, while I'm in my late 40s, I'm also a first-time dad of a 5-year.
Oh, congratulations. That is
Thank you. It is how they say that is not easy. And everyone who has a family and has a job or runs a business knows exactly what I'm talking about. The growth barrier to my company, to my business, is not the business. It is the decision that I made to be 100% present as a father. And that simply means that your business takes the backseat from time to time, more often than not, actually. And it is a conscious decision that I run a very tight ship and that I do not want to rebuild the size of the business that I had prior to starting my current business 7 years ago. It is something that took a lot of reflection on my end, and then in the end, a lot of guts to say, you know what, you've put all this time and effort into your education, you studied all these business schools, you might want to see a return on investment at some point. But life is not about return on investment. And I will never get a second chance to raise a child the way I want to. So money comes and goes, but your relationship with your children doesn't come and go. So at this point, my focus is not on building my business or growing the business. I know the time will come to do that, and I know I will be ready at that point. But right now, if you gave me a magic wand, I wouldn't use it. It's exactly perfect as it is right now.
I love that answer, especially because I'm a single mom, so I know how it is. And I've worked really hard and spent a lot of hours in my business, and I've missed out. I haven't missed out on anything with them, but I've missed out on time in the house with them. But but as far as their events and things like that, the flexibility of having this
Yeah.
business, there's nothing like it. And there's been times where, you know what, the business hasn't gotten as big or where it wanted to go because of that, right? Because we're creating businesses to have that flexibility. That was my why. I wanted to be home with my kids when they were little, when they came home from
Yeah.
school. And you have your why, which is, it's beautiful. I love it. And I think that's another big takeaway for people who are listening. If you're in, Alex has been doing this for a long time. This is his second business. He shared he's 7 years in this one, plus years, and he is very clear on his why. And that's one thing I think that everybody that breeds success. When you're clear on your why and why you're doing this and getting up every day, and setting your boundaries, which it sounds like you're doing very well, Alex, that leads to great success and joy inside of your business as well, which a lot of people are building a business that might be successful, but they don't have the joy that comes along with it. So kudos to you and congratulations on your baby, on your little one. My last question for you is, I don't even have to ask it because normally I'll say, like, if I could bring you back in a year, what does success look like for you? But I think you kind of wrapped it up, summed it up there. Unless there's anything that you want to add.
I think success is it comes in a lot of shapes or forms. What success means for me today might not be the same thing that it is next year. Maybe on a grand scheme of things, it might not change that much substantially. But when you take a look, like what gives you these moments of joy every day, and that kind of is for me synonym for success, it will change over time. I know that in a year from now, um, our courses business will have grown more and more, which allows me to travel less and less and to be more present at home. So success for me next year, like in a year from now, will probably be being home more than I'm away. Like last year, for example, 2024, I think I traveled about 160, 170 days. That
Wow.
is terrible and not sustainable. And I hope that if we speak next year, the same time, I hope I get that down to maybe 20 or 30 days a year where I'm not at home. And I am very grateful to have the freedom to make these choices and to make these decisions. And I think that is what success for me looks like.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I want to say thank you for your time today. But before we let you go, can you share with everyone how they can connect with you and learn more about your company?
The easiest way, but also the most challenging way, is to write my name and go to brueckmann.ca, which is not easy. But you can also just abbreviate it and go to 9EO.
Ah, that's easy. So 9eoi.com and brueckmann.ca. And make sure and he's on LinkedIn. You shared you're on LinkedIn. You're putting a lot of educational content out there. So go check him out on LinkedIn as well. We have all of Alex's information and all of his links and contact information everywhere you can find him inside of the show notes. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can see his books behind him that he was referring to earlier. And we say hi and thank you for joining us on YouTube. If you can, if you know of anybody that would benefit from Alex and learning more about him and his company and how he supports businesses with strategy, then please share this episode with them. The more that we can get this information out, the more that we are able to support businesses in growing and thriving. Most businesses fail within the first 5 years of opening their doors. We want to see that number flipped and see more businesses thriving and growing. Alex has made that happen. He's been thriving and growing for over 5 years. So he has a lot of value that he's presenting to you today. So if you know of somebody that would be beneficial or supported by Alex's message and his information today, please share. We would love for you to hit that subscribe button if you're enjoying what you've heard today as well. That helps us ping you and let you know when we have more amazing guests like Alex on the show. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, thank you. And again, if you know of somebody that would benefit from our conversation today, please share it with someone who would gain a lot of who get value out of this, out of our conversation. If you'd like to leave us a review, we'd love to have it and we'll be happy to share it on air as well. If you're looking to grow your visibility and you're trying different things, Alex is sharing what's working for him. It's LinkedIn, sharing educational content around what they do and how they support. And if you're trying different things and you just feel like nothing's working and you're not getting to where you want to go, please download our Spotlight to Scale blueprint. You can go to spotlighttoscale.com/blueprint. And there's a number of different ways that you can grow your visibility. One of them is one of the ways that Alex shared with you with LinkedIn social media content, as well as podcasting, whether it's you hosting or you guesting. And he's been a guest on over 100 podcasts, so he knows what he's talking about. Alex, thank you so much for your time today. Before I let you go, is there anything you'd like to share or say that I didn't get to ask you or we didn't touch on today?
Well, I would say, especially for the guys and girls out there that run their business or just started their business, you need a certain runway. So unless you have that runway, unless you know you can sustain your business over 2 or 3 years, please make an informed decision. The reason my businesses have worked was always because I had enough runway. So I knew that while I was creating something new, while I was experimenting with certain things, I could rely on things that already worked. And when you grow a business, being able to rely on something that already works is absolutely critical. Then you can buy yourself time, and you will need that time to experiment, to grow, to learn, and to be successful.
Great advice. So thank you, Alex, again for being here. Thank you all for listening to Alex and I. Go make sure you connect with him on LinkedIn. Go check him out on in his website, 9eoi.com, correct? Yep.
All right.
And brueckmann.ca. And again, check the show notes to grab his information. And I look forward to seeing you on our next episode of the Business Growth Spotlight.